creation of a masterpiece continues. Aloha! This is Lauren Adams. Welcome back to day 20 of The Journey Continues. My actual art education began in 1956. The next door neighbor was an art teacher at Corona High School, and she invited me, for heaven's sake, page 265, to become one of her private students in exchange for gardening. I loved flowers, and I also loved to paint. This was somehow an appointment with destiny, because I started off with watercolors. And I did become fairly proficient at alla prima skies and washes at 11 years of age. Until then, I was using opaque watercolors and pencils to draw flowers, birds, dogs, and cats, neighbors' pets, and stuff like that. But thanks to Mrs. Miriam Young, I was off to a good start with transparent watercolors. She lived right next door, and I was over there a lot. I never seemed to wear out my welcome, and she was always glad to see me. She would fix tea and crumpets with jam, and the work was all set up and done. We set up later watercolor blocks to use whenever we were not there. This was my first introduction to jasmine tea with milk and honey. And I learned that the best way to drink tea was just the way she made it, with a little bit of milk and honey. Her skills at washing wet into wet with large, soft sable brushes was something I always remembered and admired, and I use often when I paint anything in watercolor. I like it a lot. Most of the next few years were filled with more or less the same things. I was a loner, so I stayed in my room most of the time working on paintings, drawings, and building ships in a bottle. Accordion was my real joy in those days, so I worked hard on all the music I could find. Between all of the art projects and my love for music, I had a rich, full life all by myself. At like 14 years old. Wow. Academically, I was not anything special, and I was indeed one of those pretenders in all of the classes that I found boring. Of course, I got A's in art and any kind of music, especially choir. Throughout math, English, social studies, and English literature, I would just sit and draw instead. For some reason, perhaps the sound of the teacher's voice, I would always fall asleep in history when I did find it interesting. I did love spelling, and I was always on the spelling bees. But for most part, I was bored to tears and would just as soon have been home making art on any creative project other than being there. So any of my own ideas were what I preferred. Please understand that this is my testimony about how I do understand why and how one becomes a pretender. If there's no propensity in any subject, it happens all by itself. Tests in the academic world only measure the amount of successful brainwashing. So for most of the part, I'm happy that they all correctly identified me. I always remember that Albert Einstein had two quotes that were in my favor, and they did fit me perfectly at that time. First, an education is what remains after one has forgotten everything they learned in school. And the second is art is intelligence at play. Thank you once again for your kind attention and interest. Day 21 is next.